Sup? Welcome to Tales Tomorrow. I am Morrow, your storyteller for today, and with me we have some more RPG horror stories. I don't know if I'm gonna be busy on like New Year's Eve or anything like that, so if we don't see each other until the start of January, I hope you have yourself wonderful holidays, and I hope you enjoyed what half a year that we spent together for Tales Tomorrow. Just a little over. I think I started in like very late May. I think. It's been already almost half a year at this point, and the channel's grown so much, so all I can say is thank you guys so much for the support on the channel. Anyway, let's get some RPG horror stories for today. Whiny player gets mad that the entire party doesn't go back on a side mission everyone agreed to because he didn't. He then proceeds to nearly make the DM cry by calling her campaign padded. I joined this table where it's a world that has a war going on, and that's escalated into one of those war to end all wars, where this will change the world forever, and we are either going to make sure the war has an outcome where the world is benefited from it. Overall, the campaign was pretty epic. With all the different factions being so different and large-scale battles, that was a good 90 hours of gameplay in total. But there was one player that made 30 of those hours absolutely excruciating. This player was notorious for being quite selfish, and always trying to ensure the survival of his own characters, sometimes even throwing party members under the bus to do so. And whenever the party did something selfish, he would bitch, cry, and moan like a child. Whether it was freeing slaves, retrieving food for starving villagers in a famine, or getting a stolen family heirloom back from a robber, he would complain the whole time. There's this place in the world known as a paradise, a place where there's plenty of food, nice weather, but only the people who are pure of heart can go there, meaning that people will use it as a safe haven from the war. In this quest, we were supposed to escort a refugee family to the paradise. The mother was pregnant, the father was very sick, and the son was blind, and the daughter had anxiety, but they had each other and loved each other very much. The whole party essentially unanimously decided to help them because we weren't heartless monsters. Except of course, this a-hole. He just said no, and got confused when we started doing the quest. He said that because he said no, they can't do the quest because the whole party had to do the quest. The DM herself said that he doesn't need to do the quest. He huffed and stumped along with us. Throughout the mission, which took a couple of hours, he was acting like a passive-aggressive dickwad and would make snide comments and jokes about the son being blind. I have to admit, some of them were pretty freaking funny, but eventually I got fed up with his whining and said that he can either shut up or get his ass on the bench, which he did. After the quest, he had the audacity to say we can't do side quests anymore because they're boring filler and slowing down the game, which hurt DM's feelings, as she put a lot of effort into making the world feel big and loved writing side quests, as they added to the campaign's world and made it feel lived in. I get there's a main quest, the big story arc of the war and stuff, but what do you do when you're not focusing on the war and the combat? You have other events that happen that encourage more world building and fill the world to be more lively. Side quests are a really important way to expand on the world while also giving side tasks that aren't necessarily something about the war, something with a grand story arc, something that could just be done from point A to point B and done, have their own, unique storyline within it. And it's fine to make side quests. If the DM wants to make side quests and everybody else is enjoying it, that's fine. This guy just seems to be the only one that's having a problem with it, because if it's not for me, I don't want to do it. But if I have to do it, I'm gonna complain about it the whole way through. You didn't have to join the side quest. You could have just been like, alright, I'm gonna dip out from the group for now. Y'all just have fun doing side quests. I'll be back when the main story starts. Not be a dickhead about it. He then doubled down, saying he just wants the campaign to end, and we are forcing him to play. And the only reason he's still playing is because he can't have two games going at once. You could also just leave. Nobody's stopping you to play the game. There's the door. The DM was on the verge of tears. He didn't want to play and was just playing out of obligation. The entire party voted him off the table, and he looked both annoyed and relieved by this. We got back to playing, and it was amazing. Also, since I was the one who was praising her for having such a well-written side quest, the woman gave birth to an unexpected twins and only came up with a name for one of them. They named the other baby after my character, W. A big win indeed. And look, if you don't like that the DM is doing a bunch of side quests and it's not your pacing, not your cup of tea, don't be a complete and utter dickhead and start badmouthing the DM and trying to I don't know, it's not to be criticism, it's just insulting the DM's efforts because apparently it's just padded filler. If it's too much of filler for you, there's the door. Leave. You don't have to be in the campaign. You don't have to be part of this. You can go. They'll find somebody else that's actually going to be enjoying the stuff the DM wants to put on. If you love the craft, keep writing it. Have fun. Don't let some naysayers or antis, is that the new word that people use? Anti, like you anti something? Don't let some antis or naysayers tell you otherwise. The jerks that exist in the world. Don't focus on them. Focus on the people you have fun with. Your players. Focus on the people you have fun with. Your players, your DMs, and not some dickheads. I don't know who the a-hole here. So I've been a LARPer in some capacity since before most people had seen the lightning bolt video. So I've seen some crap. It's only one story of many. This was back in the day of the first run of New World of Darkness. I'm a weirdo in that I actually prefer New World to Chronicles of Darkness, and I prefer New World over Chronicles of Darkness. And my two favorite games in that were Mage the Awakening and Changeling the Lost. That was a lightness and heroism that was a terrific counterpoint to the gloom and despair, and even the darkness felt right, reminding us that it was a gothic look at the modern age. In this particular Changeling the Lost game, I played a character who is, at the time of writing this, in her third iteration. Lily, a gentle witch, who balances her kind nature with her fierce maternal instinct and willingness to fling her glass cannon ass face first into hell if it will give the fighters a shot. This version was an autumn court, fear and occult powers, darkling grave white, meaning she was based on legends of ghosts and hauntings, working as a high school drama teacher. Her biggest challenge was that she was in a friendship with a fellow changeling who was, to put it blatantly, toxic in a toxic relationship with a changeling that Lily had a crush on. Lily was too much of a good friend to try and swoop in when they split, but she was pinning for him while also being besties with her. We had all agreed to it and had a blast with a little downtime soap opera. Then one game things went sideways horribly. To avoid needing multiple flares for this post, we all began with the announcement that the PC Spring Queen and her lover were dead. It was very shocking and sudden, and the game was an impromptu wake. Side note, they're fine. The Queen's player is now a mother with a really cute kid. Lily, being so close to death, sat down with a bottle of rum and sang Southern blues until she passed out. I had her talk in her sleep for comedy, then had her mumble a declaration of love. Looking back, I think in that moment, I was the a-hole. Lily's friend, let's call it Juliet, decided to exact her revenge. She called a shady ride service to take Lily home. In that moment, Juliet's player was the a-hole. If you're reading this, I don't hold it against you, because you couldn't know where it would lead. The storyteller decided, considering the sorts of crimes common in our city, that my character would be drugged and trafficked, held in a filthy brothel to be, you can guess, and I don't want to say. Well, I'm so lost. Oh, this is a huge jump into like what I was reading. In that moment, storyteller was the a-hole. In that time sense, he had apologized and never done this again. We had no idea this was so beyond okay. You're reading this, dude, we're good. You're still great in my eyes. You make a mistake and you walked it back when you realized. Now, I was not in a great place mentally. I was, for lack of better terms, desperate to be one of the cool kids in a scene full of edgelords. So with no spine to speak of and convinced I was being the coolest and fighting my own trauma about being essayed, I decided to play the story through. Oh, okay, so you're sticking with it instead of like retconning it. Okay, alright, that's interesting. Lily was rescued by her friends, becoming broken as she had to relive her captivity among the Fae. Only worse. Looking back, I was the a-hole again. I tried to apologize to anyone I could find. Juliet's player was horrified. She only wanted to scare my PC. She vanished somewhere after that. I haven't seen her since. I still blame myself. Okay, so how do we unwrap this? I gotta be honest, I don't know anything about Changeling the Lost or Mage the Awakening. There we go, I found it here. Actually, I didn't. It's all fake. So your character was into somebody else, but they were already dating somebody and they split up. You basically decided not to go for the person, but you were still pinning for them while still being besties with your bestie. There was an announcement that somebody died and your character went depressed and then mumbled about like a confessional love to somebody. I don't see what the problem is. I have no idea. I feel like maybe the storyteller was the one that kind of went too far with the whole like becoming trafficked thing. If you didn't consent to this whole thing as a storyline and stuff, I didn't ask ahead of time. I think the storyteller is kind of the a-hole here. I mean, if your friend is trying to if everybody is role-playing their characters, right? And somebody wants a revenge on your character, the only thing they did was try to call a shady car service. And it was just a lot of miscommunication. I don't think anybody is the a-hole here, but if anybody was, maybe the storyteller. And that's a very strong maybe, because honestly, I don't know. I guess the storyteller, if anybody, will be the a-hole. I gotta just be honest, I just don't see how you were the a-hole. There's too much context is missing saying that for me to make a coherent response. Anybody in the comment section, if you play Changing the Lost, can you help me out with this? Can you tell me who was the a-hole here? Because I have no idea. It's bewildering to me. The former friend who wanted everything handed to him on a silver platter. During the summer of 2022, I started a campaign with several of my online friends. The premise was that they were members of a small detective agency in a city filled with crime and corruption. The initial party members were a half-elf bard who was the leader of the agency, an elf rogue, a tiefling druid, a goblin fighter, a human cleric, and as subject to today's story, an elf ranger named Isa. Isa's player, who I'll just call Kent to keep him anonymous, was the one I was friends with the longest out of the group, being friends with him since 2017. However, he started to become well known in our online circle to be a poor sport in terms of games. During the last couple of years we were friends with him. Kent would gloat about his victories he got in games like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Among Us long after the games ended, and rub salt in the wounds of others when they were doing poorly. Okay, I don't know anybody that prides himself on being really good at Among Us. I mean, yeah, I know the game was like really popular at some points and it was really hype and stuff. Now it's kind of less relevant. I mean, the game is still enjoyable and stuff, but to gloat about being good at Among Us is a weird flex, but okay. But if Kent was doing poorly, reactions tended to range from him moping, leaving the game before it finishes, or, while I was never there for this, that would happen and only recently found out, scream angrily at others. As you probably found out by now, Kent wasn't any better at rolling with the punches at D&D. Red flags popping up as early as the first session when they were investigating the murder of a farmer who was a former adventurer. There was a typical complaining and getting salty whenever he rolled low, but I want to focus on specific incidents. About 2/3 of the way into the session, Isa, who was missing 10 points due to a previous combat encounter, the party started level 5 for reference sake, took a risky but super cheap surgery from the equivalent of a back alley doctor who was formerly a suspect in said murder. A halfling cleric whose quirk was that he only used fire magic even when healing, her method of healing being to create a fire to cauterize any wounds. I made sure to establish beforehand the risks of taking the surgery, an NPC dwarf complaining how she nearly burned his arm off from her healing. And unfortunately for Kent, the healing didn't go so well for Isa due to the low roll he got for the Constitution save. He was healed but got a level of exhaustion from the semi-botched surgery. It was only one level of exhaustion, so he only had disadvantage on ability checks and was otherwise ungimped in combat. You might be asking why he didn't simply have the cleric of the party heal him rather than the risky NPC option. Your guess is as good as mine. Psh, who needs proper healing? Cleric with your regular healing? I'm gonna go to the surgeon over there who's gonna fix me up good. Hey Surge, go ahead and burn me up. Ah! Oh, I'm healed, but now I'm exhausted and hurt and have to suffer for the consequences. I don't know why you would want to go to like a back alley surgeon when a healing potion is just, what, 50 gold at a store? Just get that. Or hey, better yet, short rest. Anyway, apparently that was still too much for Kent. He repeatedly tried to get the party to take a long rest so he would no longer be exhausted, even though it was only early afternoon in game, and the party was still investigating. It got to the point that by the end of the session, when the party decided to confront a trio of adventurers who believed were responsible for the murder they were investigating due to the information they gathered, Ken had his character flat out leave the group so he could have a long rest in the office. The failed perception and investigation rolls he was getting leading him to believe he couldn't do anything. Thankfully, he decided to have Isa come back during the second session, though I have a strong suspicion that he only did that because I nerfed the detriment he was suffering from. I felt that a botched leg surgery wouldn't really be enough to justify disadvantage on all ability checks, so for the second session I simply had to be disadvantaged on athletics and acrobatics. Things were fine for the next few sessions, but then Ken started to show another issue. Being unable to accept the party members can die. At one point, when the party was split up while investigating a completely different murder, a lawyer who was seemingly killed while in a caravan, with the caravan driver not seeing or hearing any attack, half the party, the bard, cleric and druid, were attacked by an invisible stalker while they were investigating the forest. The invisible stalker was having the upper hand, so Kent messaged me saying he was worried about what was going on, and asked if he and the goblin fighter could jump in. Those two were miles away from the scene, investigating the city the victim was last seen alive in, and had no way of knowing what was going on. Obviously, I said that he couldn't. A couple of sessions later, the bard of the party, Lucio, ended up agreeing to a gladiator fight to the death with a half-orc barbarian NPC in exchange for vital information about the murder. All the players were aware that it was possible for Lucio to be killed and were willing to accept it, except for Kent. During the match, Kent messaged me asking if I had a way to save everyone. I didn't answer this. The half-orc barbarian had the upper hand pretty consistently, and when the bard fell unconscious, Kent messaged me again, begging me not to kill the bard. I planned from the beginning that the barbarian NPC would leave up to the fate if the bard lived, and luckily the bard passed his death saves. But a part of me wonders if I should have killed him to teach Kent a lesson that death happens. My question is, was the bard okay with that sort of thing? Was everybody else okay with that sort of thing? Cause like, if everybody else is okay with death and actually welcomes death as part of a mechanic, then Kent should as well. I understand where Kent is coming from. Trying to save an ally when you can is better than doing nothing at all. I completely understand where they're coming from. I don't know. I mean, if the bard is okay with it, right? If the bard is not asking to be rescued, then I don't know. What do y'all think? What do y'all think about this sort of premise? Let me know in the comment section below. I'm kind of a little bit mixed feelings. I kind of want to see what happens in the story, so I'm gonna stop blabbering and we're gonna continue with the story for now. Then we get to the final session Kent was part of. The party was investigating the case of who destroyed the clock tower in a noble district of the city. While investigating, the party came across a trio of adventurers separate from the murders of the first few sessions, who were with them at an event going on to the night of the clock tower destruction. One of the NPCs being a human cleric who had the quirk of saying "I love you" to every person she meets, as long as the person wasn't rude or annoying to her. After the party asked some questions to the trio, the halfling barbarian NPC, who was more or less the leader of the trio, made a bet that they couldn't solve the case within 3 days. Isa, or rather Kent, wanted to impress the cleric NPC who said "I love you" to him. Kent evidently not paying attention to how she said that constantly to others, friends and strangers she met alike, throughout the 3 to 4 sessions they've known her. So he bet 100 gold without the party's consent that they would. I normally would have written this off as just him role-playing a funny character moment, but Kent himself, who's also known in our circle for being down bad for fictional women, seemed shocked when this was explained to Isa. Regardless, the 3 in-game days passed, and it was time for the party to give their summation of what happened. When Isa was asked to give his summation about what he thinks happened, Kent said that the real-life time has passed during the investigation led him to forget the information they found. Kent didn't make notes, and he felt that he was being put on the spot. He asked me for more information about what happened, and I told him that the party could convene and to review what they found out. When they did, Kent pushed the goblin fighter off the party, Nash, to give the summation instead, without giving either the character or the player any heads up. Nash's summation wasn't complete. He correctly guessed who destroyed the clock tower and the method used to destroy it, but couldn't explain away the alibi the culprit had. So the party lost the bet, Kent losing a lot of his gold as a result. Because of this incident and him believing he was put on the spot, as well as a couple of real-life issues Kent was going through in college, he essentially just stopped showing up in session. Now, if it was just for the stuff that was in my campaign, I wouldn't be making this post. A lot of what he did had me raise eyebrows, but it wasn't unbearable or anything. But later on, after Kent and the player of the cleric got kicked from our friend circle for reasons unrelated to the campaign, I found out about stuff Kent did in a different campaign that I wasn't player of. The premise of that campaign was essentially them being an isekai anime world. I think there was supposed to be normal people who got the powers of certain anime characters after they were dragged into the world, but I couldn't tell for sure. He showed some fairly troubling behavior there. One example being when an NPC ally had her memories erased. Kent had his character essentially lie to her that they were dating in his attempt to get with her. Oh, that's kinda slimy, dude. Nobody at the party was happy with that, in character or out. And his character was punished with a slap to the face when the NPC got her memories restored. But the reason Kent left the group is what led me to make the post. At one point, the party got a wish, and Kent used his wish that he could have a Saber, a character from the Fate series, as his familiar. Really just so that he could have a waifu traveler with him. However, in the Fate series, Saber is simply a title that multiple characters have had. So the GM did a roll to see which Saber he got. And unfortunately for Kent, he didn't get the Saber he wanted, Artoria Pendragon. Kent left the campaign the next day and sent a tirade to the DM yelling at him for it. All because he didn't get his waifu. This guy is ridiculous. Kent is ridiculous. He's a character. Gloats over Among Us. gets upset he doesn't get his waifu. As you probably surmised by now, I'm no longer friends with Kent. Many of it for reasons unrelated to either campaign that I won't go into, but the way he acted in D&D summed up his overall behavior pretty well. A whiner who couldn't stand whenever things didn't go his way. There are stories where sometimes people reveal some of their nasty characteristics when they first play D&D, right? Or like any sort of TTRPGs. They'll find outside of D&D, but as soon as you put them in D&D space, they just kind of play out their crazy, weird fantasy and they become nasty and difficult to be around, and just maybe they're fun IRL, just not fun to play games with or TTRPGs with. Kent, I don't know. I mean, listen, if you're not missing out for not having Kent around, then hey, power to you. You do whatever you gotta do. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, not having Kent around in your life probably is gonna be a good thing for you. I don't know, man. This last story is kind of ridiculous. The guy getting so upset that he didn't get a waifu, used a wish spell for a waifu, has a waifu of some kind. How many different sabers are out there? I know a little bit about the Fate series. Basically, whenever you get chosen by, I don't know, the Grail Wars or something, I think it's something along the lines of that. But basically, you're given like a protector by the title. It can be Archer, it can be Saber, it can be, I think, Lancer, Dancer, Prancer. That's the reindeer names, never mind. But anyway, I mean, if you have a familiar that's like a saber, that's like a strong fighter, why would you complain over that? What, because it wasn't your favorite waifu? Ridiculous. Kent is a ridiculous man. Don't be like Kent, please. And with that, that's gonna be all our stories for today. I want to thank you very much for watching, and thanks so much for being here. If you like what I do, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. Also, if the RPG Horror Stories ever goes down, or if you want to submit your own personalized horror story, email is down in the description below. I'll see you again in more Tales Tomorrow. Bye-bye.